the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle-Walyalup area and recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. Attendance at the meeting: on the left, the members of the committee, Councillors Sullivan, Lorver, Groom, Lang, Graham and Mayor Fitzharding. I'm Councillor Jones, the presiding officer, and we have officers assisting the committee. Any apologies? There are none. Leaves of absence? None. Any disclosures of interest by members? I believe there are a couple. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I have an interest in the South Terrace 1, the extension of time. I own a property immediately abutting that development, so it's a financial interest, and I'll leave.
And Councillor Lang.
Yep, same reason.
Okay, and you will be leaving the room, both of you? Yep. Financial interest, yeah. Okay. Responses to questions taken on notice. There are none. Public question time. This is for questions on items which are not on the agenda, items of a general nature. I believe there is. Would you give us your name and state your whatever it is you wish to say? Thank you. So the microphone, you have to press the right button. Right button.
Okay.
Then make sure it's very close to your mouth.
Thank you. Okay, got through the technology. Thank you, councillors. I'm Barry Healy. I live in Whitegum Valley, and I'm an active member of the Nanine Common Garden Group. And today I sent an email to all the members of the committee, but I didn't send it to Hannah because I didn't know that you'd be here. Just with photos of the wildlife corridor that we have planted so far. That's the first stage of our project for that block of land. The wildlife corridor is to attract bobtail lizards out of Booyambara Park, or they already exit Booyambara Park, and then they have trouble once they get to the other side of the road. So we've provided them with a bobtail highway that takes them down to the sump that's to the south. And this is part of our project to build an organic garden, food producing garden on that block of land. The block of land is blessed by excellent soil. There is a bore there to provide water and ample sunshine. And our intention is to build a facility that can provide food for the entire community in the face of climate change. And just right next to that block of land, there is the shack community, where if you want to live in shack, you have to earn $55,000 a year or less. So there's a very well-motivated group of people there who are prepared to put in the hard work of building the garden. So I just wanted to let you know that this Nanine Common Garden Group has been operating for over a year. We are incorporated. We meet every month. We have very broad support from within Whitegum Valley, a lot of members. So I just draw this to your attention so that you don't think that that block of land is just a vacant block of land. No, it is an organic garden in the process of becoming. Thank you.
And thank you very much for sharing that with us. Any committee members wish to comment? No, thank you very much for that, and congratulations on all the work that you've done.
Bryn?
You do wish to comment, Councillor Groom?
Oh, see you, Barry. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the great work that group's doing. I walked past that garden yesterday morning, and it is looking spectacular after only a year's growth.
The next item is petitions. I don't believe there are any. Deputations, special deputations, presentations, confirmation of minutes. I'll move the minutes of the Planning Committee of 5th of July. Is that correct? That's not right, is it? No? Of the October Planning Committee meeting, anyway. Sorry, August. All those in favour? Sorry, seconder. Councillor Lorber, seconded. All those in favour? So we've got the wrong date in the minutes. Let's make sure we correct that. Elected member communication. Is there any? Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, for the sake of the audience as well, this is the last meeting tonight that Councillor Jones will be chairing. He's retiring at the end of his term and he misses the October meeting. So, as Deputy Chair, I just thought I'd say thank you for all your considered opinions and foresight as Chair. You've been very fair, not only to the community but also to the members. I personally have enjoyed working with you, and I'm sure everyone else has. The Mayor will get further to say when you're at the last full council meeting, so I thought I'd jump in now before you finish up your chairmanship tonight. So thank you very much, Councillor Jones, and good luck to you and Valerie travelling around Australia.
And we've got an interesting agenda to finish with, so we'll see how we go. About another 2,000 pages, one. Thank you for that. We're now on to reports and recommendations. So the first item is the police station. I'd just like to make a few introductory comments on this, just to make sure people are very clear on the process. It's an unusual process and one we very rarely see, but because of the vesting of the land is not controlled by the Fremantle Town Planning Scheme. It's state land under the control of the Minister. So for that reason, planning decisions have to be made by the WA Planning Commission, and this council is not the deciding body, and it's not even the body that writes the recommendation. So we're even further removed in the process this time than normal. So the process is that we are an interested party that can make comment on the application. Our comments will go to the WAPC. The WAPC will write the responsible authority report, which will make a recommendation. That recommendation will go to JDAP. JDAP consists of 3 ministerial appointments and 2 elected members from council, and that's scheduled to happen in the last 10 days before the election. So if it's delayed for any reason, half of our JDAP members won't be councillors anymore, so that'll be more complicated. So we'll have to. So the JDAP meetings are open to the public. They're generally in this room. The only difference in formality is that you must apply in writing beforehand, and you must give an indication of what you want to say. You can't just turn up on the day and say, and all your comments will go into the agenda, and you'll be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. In our meetings, it's 3 minutes. And if you want further information on that, contact the officers. Once we know and register, and once we know the date, we will notify people. Okay. So I just want to make clear the process. There is an alternative recommendation which will be discussed. If you've not seen that, there were 5 copies outside. It's also on the website. It's a modification of the officer's recommendation. It's not a contradiction of it. And that's the one that will be discussed first. So bearing those points in mind, you have 3 minutes to speak. I'd ask you not to be overly repetitious. And you have 3 minutes. You'll hear a sound when you've got a few seconds still to go. So the first person I have here is Jemima Williamson Wong. If you'd like to come to the microphone, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Jemima and I'm speaking in regards to the new district police complex. I attended the recent Politics in the Pub about this project and wanted to reiterate some common themes and concerns that emerged from the discussion that night. It was clear that the community is upset with the proposal for a variety of reasons. People feel as if there was not enough community consultation, that the design is overbearing, that it poses a risk to community safety, and that our heritage wall should not be sacrificed. I tend to agree with these themes. I'm aware that this is a state project, which means the council will simply be making a comment to be shared with the WAPC. I also understand that we all want to ensure a good deal for Freo, and that might mean compromising on this building so that we enter future deals from a better leverage point. Tonight, I'd like to speak more directly to the design of the building, specifically the ground floor. Bringing a district police complex into Fremantle provides an opportunity for us to again be a leader, this time in quality design. It's an opportunity to design better and for the building to be built with the community rather than simply adjacent to it. I do not believe that the proposed building delivers an empathetic and creative response to the historic fabric of Fremantle, as Cox Architects have claimed. Instead, it tends to dominate the landscape and acts as a blockade between Freo CBD and South Fremantle. In the current design, the ground floor of this building acts as a blank wall, which adds nothing to the streetscape. And this is the area I think Fremantle Council has an opportunity to advocate for improvement in. I want to see a design that activates this ground floor. In my opinion, this should include an increase in green space and planting, more than the 3 trees seen in the current render. This would not only soften the design, but many studies indicate that green spaces encourage positive social interactions, cultivate social cohesion, and lower crime risks. I would also like to see public toilets and lockers included in this design. Fremantle has a lack of such amenities, which I believe would really benefit not only our locals, but the many tourists that visit our city. If these toilets and lockers were implemented as some paid amenities, they could produce a profit for the city, a win-win. There are many key principles of the State Planning Policy Number 7, Design of the Built Environment, that the JDAP considers, and these include built form and scale, context and character, sustainability, amenity, and community, all of which are areas that I believe require improvement in this design. I am asking you to pass on the many concerns of our community to the state government through the WAPC. It is my hope that you will step up and advocate for a design that accurately serves our community and our city.
Very well timed. I've just realised there are 2 people who wish to speak and they're not speaking for or against, so I'll take those next. Margaret Kerr, you just have questions?
Thank you. My questions are an attempt to clarify how we've got to the point we're at. So I do know that there is very strong community support for a new purpose-built local police station for Fremantle. I note that after the Stan Raleigh Centre was demolished in late 2017, a very highly utilised car park was provided for locals. I note that the Fremantle Police District, in its current form, was the boundaries were set in 2018, and it includes a huge area: Applecross, Cottesloe, Murdoch, and Coburn. We are on the fringe of that. I further note that the Council agreed in September 2020 to the eventual use of the former Stan Raleigh site as a police complex to serve the whole of this police district, so it had already been defined at that point. And I note that the 2021 state budget recognised the significantly extended scope of the project by allocating an additional $34 million of funding. I therefore ask, at what point in the course of 2020 the City of Fremantle recognised the full extent of the proposal, whether the City and or Council took steps to communicate this changed scope to the Fremantle community, and whether concerns were identified at that point about the inevitable impact a development of this scale would have on the Fremantle Prison Buffer Zone in general, and on the remaining built form, specifically the limestone walls in particular. Thank you.
I'll just ask the director if you can answer that. From my perspective, to my recollection, all the discussion beforehand was about a Fremantle police station, and we had the tender process to provide a leased building, which Sirona tendered their Woolworths building at the time, and Silverleaf put in a comprehensive design for a police station on the Woolstores site, which was approved by council and by JDAP. And then at some point, the government changed its mind and decided to use land that it owned rather than leased land. And the minister exercised his right to take back the vested land, which was the car park. And I think that was, to my recollection, the first the council knew about it being moved to the car park. But perhaps the director can shed some light on that.
Thank you through the chair, and to try and answer those questions specifically. At what point did in the course of 2020 did the city recognise the full extent? I think it's probably fair to say it was not known during 2020 what the full extent is. The communication that went out on our website was about a significant development for a police complex, which was in excess of $50 million. Clearly, that's not a small building. It's a major undertaking, of the same sort of scale as this building that we're sitting in. So In terms of the full extent of the design, that only really came through as part of the DA, that the city's taken the initiative to put that out for public consultation. Although we weren't obliged to, that was the first opportunity we've had to share that with the community. I think that answers the first couple of points. There was a point in there about the impact on heritage. Most certainly the city office is in very early days. After that decision was made to put it on Stan Riley site, we raised the issue of being in the buffer zone of the heritage wall, and this would not be an easy approval process. Further to that, in terms of the detail, we advised the applicant they would need to both get Commonwealth heritage approval and state heritage approval, given the fact that the buffer zone is part of the World Heritage listing. And we went to the extent of drawing up a diagram of the limestone walls, not only along South Terrace, but up the side of Stan Riley, with the heritage layers on that, which explained the age of the different walls, because they're not all convict built walls. There's some that were built in the 20s. And we passed that on to the applicant in the very early days to try and assist with explaining the complexity on that point.
I will just add that the Heritage Council's advice, the State Heritage Council and the Commonwealth Heritage Council advice is not available to either the Council's officers or the elected members at this stage. That will go directly to WAPC and should be included in the JDAP agenda. So I say it's a very complicated process and not an entirely satisfactory one for the community or for the Council. The Council's undertaken its own heritage assessment, which it wasn't required to do, but it has. And I would further point out that there are no planning fees paid to the Council for this project. It's a $100 million project. That all the planning fees go to the WAPC and to JDAP. The Council is bearing the entire cost of this process, which again is quite unfair. But it points to a number of things that, in my view, are wrong with the planning system at the moment. And I hope people will take away that the real issues are not with the Council, the real issues are with the state government, and we need to all be very focused on that going forward. Ian Kerr, did you have similar questions?
Thank you, Chairman. I spent 14 years as an elected councillor for the town of Vincent, and during that time I very quickly came to the conclusion that any development application that required a large number of conditions for approval almost certainly should be sent back to the drawing board. And I note that this proposed police complex requires 7 pages of concerns and matters to be addressed. Now, I acknowledge that the City of Fremantle doesn't have the option of sending this back to the drawing board, but I do find it disturbing that the officer recommendation states that, I quote, the use of the site as a civic use brackets district police complex, close brackets, is supported, despite the unanimous rejection of the proposal in community submissions. Although, sorry, from talking to you a bit earlier, I understand there was one in favour. City of Fremantle is nevertheless in a difficult situation, as you've stated, but it's in there also because it's previously supported the use of the site for a new police station and apparently failed to notice or respond to the change in scope to police district police complex and the corresponding increase in cost in 2021. Supporting the current proposal, as point 1 of the officer recommendation states, would simply compound this failure, and more importantly, it would potentially undermine the position of council and the community at the JDAP. I know that Councillor Lang has put in a very substantial alternative recommendation, and I support that, and I urge members of the committee to support that. However, point 1 remains as originally stated, and I would urge adoption of an alternative to point 1, as I circulated by email to all councillors over the weekend, along the lines of the use of the site as a civic use for police purposes is supported, noting the importance of a purpose-built modern police facility in the city centre. However, the scale of the building and activity proposed as district police complex is regarded as excessive, particularly with regard to the bulk and scale of the building, the impact on the streetscape and heritage context, and traffic and pedestrian safety issues associated with frequent police vehicle access and egress. Whatever the local and regional strategic importance of locating a district police complex in Fremantle, I don't think anybody regards this as a suitable site for such a facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? We'll go back to the Paul Loring. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. Since the pandemic, my street hardly ever receives the Fremantle Herald, so we seldom know anything about notifications for comment or public debate, and this is certainly the case for the police station. What I did hear was most Fremantle residents think this is an application for Fremantle's local police station, but it's not. It's nothing like that at all. It's for a district police complex servicing other stations for locales such as Cottesloe, Palmyra, Coburn, Murdoch, Jandakot, as far south as Henderson and suburbs east of the freeway. It's a 24/7 emergency response centre for this entire area, employing between 350 and 400 staff with parking and hence emergency activity for about 100 motor vehicles. This in our city, where we have lowered the speed limits to 40 kilometres an hour for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists and the enjoyment of our tourist visitors. And even Hattonton Road speed limit has recently been lowered to 50 kilometres an hour. It's ludicrous. Others will no doubt tell you the last thing the ratepayers, the tourist and entertainment business need is lights and sirens and high-speed vehicles dashing about 24/7, especially when those needs are for suburbs 20 kilometres away. The council seems to have supported this police district concept for years, basically putting the finance aspects of hospitality ahead of lost amenity for Fremantle residents. The council needs to reverse that support and fight, and I mean fight, for the amenity of Fremantle, our safety, our lifestyle. This fight should not be focused on the architecture of a building. It should be about its impact on our amenity. I mean, if this was for a different sort of service provider, say a brothel, the last thing we'd be talking about would be architecture. It would be the amenity loss to the suburbs in that area. It's not the council's job to support the police department. In my opinion, this whole application should stop, and instead what we as a council should be saying is we want an application for Fremantle's local police support. Thank you.
Christian Morey.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your work, Councillor Jones. I've always found you to be both blunt and sharp. Good evening, friends and neighbours. It's nice to see you all. Okay, I acknowledge that the decision about the police station is to be made by the state government, of course. However, as put in the agenda, the council acts as a referral stakeholder that can provide advice to the WA Planning Commission. Tonight's agenda recommends that development of the site is supported. Not I. I say very few people actually support it. I contradict that it's supported. You see, I organize a monthly event called Politics in the Pub. Each month, we take a new topic of interest to Fremantle residents and visitors, and for the August event, the topic was the Fremantle Police Complex. Am I speaking too loudly? Is this blurry? Great. So in all of my years organizing these events, I have rarely observed such a resounding consensus given the number and diversity of people in attendance. There were people who you could not pay to agree with one another in that room, all agreeing that there are many issues with the location of the complex. Issues I know that the council and the city are aware of, given the 224 submissions the city received against the proposal, and I'm also keen to eventually see what the MySay data says. Put simply, while many agree that the new complex would be good for Fremantle, not a soul thought the location is appropriate. I also want to point out that, from my perspective, as a resident who organizes events and heads several communities throughout the city, the last year has been especially marked by a real and widespread experience of disempowerment among residents concerning the relationship between themselves and their city and the state. Morale is at stake. Spirit. I often joke that Fremantle is in a loveless marriage with a Labour government, but now it seems that things are a little bit worse than that. And so here's my statement. Given the aforementioned consensus, the police station presents a wonderful and excellent opportunity for the city and for council to demonstrate genuine care in observing, acknowledging, and voicing the concerns of residents and the character of this beautiful city. Not in 5 years, not according to a 20-year plan, but now. I'll conclude by saying that as we organize for politics in the pub, I often find myself explaining to Freo haters and cynics that by politics, what I mean is the question of how we can better live with one another. The amount of people who do a complete 180 when they hear that is what keeps me motivated. But the remaining people who retort that there's no point engaging because nobody listens anyway is what motivates me to be here this evening. Growing tensions can be mended, disempowerment can be resolved, but you got to start. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Kent.
Hi, I'll just keep it very brief. I just want to say that the city loves to talk about heritage and the city loves to talk about community. And this development seems to be contrary to both those things, and the city seems to be supporting it. And I'll leave it at that.
Mark Woodcock.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. I don't have my usual questions on notice. I've just got some points I'd like to raise. Probably I'd like to point out in the news just in the last 2 days, China has actually leapt up and arrested a couple of people for destroying a historical wall. So we say part of the Great Wall of China was demolished, and even the Chinese government stepped in and quickly swept them up and tracked them down. So perhaps our state government should have a look at that. I also want to raise the point, when the council decided to demolish the Stan Riley, there was dissent in the community, A, because it was what it was used for, it shouldn't be destroyed, but 2, it brought in the question of the use of the land. And that was raised by the community back then. Nothing seemed to be a problem. It rolled on, we built this, put a car park over there, the council moved in, and sure enough, the land's gone. So I hope the council thinks about this sort of activity and really looks at the real impact of their decisions, because this just goes on to a long list of poor ones. I support a police station in town. I don't support putting it in the middle of a precinct. There's a lot of activities that you don't want in the centre of a town. You don't want to lock up regional police stations. It'll have firearms, it'll have CIB, it'll have lots of activities that we necessarily don't need sitting next to the football ground or to the old synagogue or even the hospital. What I would like to see is council writing to groups like the Heritage Council, asking for support to protect the wall, looking at the zone for a UNESCO heritage listed site, and looking at all those sorts of activities and asking the bodies that do have power to step in and do the right thing and do their jobs. What I would also like the council to do is look at other land. You've got Jones Street, you've got the old quarry site. I don't think Jones Street is a great location, but the old quarantine tip site at South Fremantle, without state and federal government money, that will never be improved. It'll just be left there as a wasteland forever. So here's an opportunity to take state money and turn it into a better place. To take the police station down there, parking for the weekend for South Beach, and I'm sure there's an opportunity for plenty of parkland in that area as well. So I really hope the council looks at this as an opportunity to make some better suggestions to state government, because I think we know better Fremantle better than the state government does. So there's also going to be a huge loss of parking that needs to be addressed. I hope the state government is planning to do something for the parking, because that also, you'll have a lot of extra people coming into town, and you're going to lose all those car parking spaces that are quite well utilised at the moment. And on a closing note, the bill for this building, 67 million or whatever it is, but we still don't have a public water fountain outside. So it would be really good for a council that's driving for recycling plastic and not using things to put a water station outside for people who come to talk at council.
John Dowson.
Good evening, all. Look, the John Dowson Fremantle Society, first of all, Mark Woodcock and all the previous speakers, I think, have spoken very well. I certainly concur with what they've said. Look, if we just step back a little bit, there used to be a precinct plan for this site. This is the 2005 precinct plan that was done. And you look at the scale of the proposed developments then, it was 2, 3, and 4 stories. So the maximum, with a maximum height of about 15 to 17 metres maximum. So it's interesting, we've gone from that plan in 2005, which actually disappeared, to what's happening now. And people say, well, there's a 4-storey building. If you actually look at that, I got an architect yesterday to go through the plans and tell me, if you're standing on South Terrace, how high is this building in relation to South Terrace? So he said it's 33.4 metres high if you were standing on South Terrace. And at different points, it's 28.6 or 32 and so on. But that is an astonishing height. And to go from 17 metres to 33.4, given that the detested Johnson Court of 10 stories is about 26, then 33.4 is absolutely massive. So that's the issue of what it is, the height. Just quickly, the former site, we met with the architect who did the plan for the government on the previous site on Henderson Street, when the police said, well, there's asbestos here, we've got to get this fixed up, what are we going to do? So the report that she did said, spend $20 million and fix up Henderson Street and stay where you are. So the government said, oh no, we've got free land nearby, we'll go over there. So now they've gone from a $20 million bill to a $100 million bill, which is rather ironic. Now, the current site is hugely important. And in fact, I did a report called Fremantle, the Future is in the Past, because I thought this site has had so much important community use that I should do a report on it. That was done in 2005. I don't think anybody's read it since. But just to give you an example, for example, the problem tonight is that you don't have our objections. So there's 224 objections. And the prison, for example, told me that the sight lines, the archaeology, and the wall are 3 key issues. And I would say that that is exactly where the Fremantle Society is coming from. And I'm up, my 3 minutes is up, is it? Okay, so just to wrap up, having met with the prison, they're tearing their hair out because they feel they're not getting support from the Heritage Council. They feel that, there should be a liaison between them and you guys, and all those submissions are just sort of lost, and well, they're lost to the community. And the whole process has really been ridiculously secret. I mean, let's face it, who knew about this coming? I mean, they didn't consult with the Fremantle Society, and anybody who was consulted was told they had to shut up and stay secret. So we certainly support Councillor Lang's submission, and I really think you guys hope you can give the government a message that when they come to Fremantle, they need to be far more open, transparent, and do their public consultation, because they keep dumping projects on us, whether it's the bridge, whether it's the film studio. They just dump these $100 million projects on us without even having done proper consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make the comment that the prison has made its submission directly to either the Heritage Council or the WAPC, not to the council. I understand if anybody can correct that, but I'm pretty sure that's the situation. So there is no submission before council from the prison. They've gone directly to the State Heritage Council and or WAPC. I'm not sure which. We'll now go into committee, and I'll ask Councillor Lang to move the alternative recommendation, if he's happy to do that. Yeah, and seconder, Councillor Lawver. So if the officers could get that onto the screen, I'll ask Councillor Lang to move it.
Thanks. That's moved and has been seconded. Again, it's
just for the benefit of the people in the gallery. This is the one that's on the separate attachment that was outside the door, not the one that's in the main agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Again, it's really pleasing to see so many faces come in to speak on this issue, like we saw at the local hotel recently. I would like to thank my colleague, Councillor Sue Groom, who we worked very hard together on what's on the screen in front of us at the moment. I think there is a lot to like about this proposal in terms of the intent. The intent of what the police are trying to achieve, I believe, is good. But fundamentally, I believe the proposal is flawed in the sense that it's inhibitive to the future growth and planning of Fremantle, and in particular that precinct where it sits. In that sense, it is totally unsupportive. The pieces that I do like about the police station are, we are trying to build a city. There are 300 office workers in this building, and that is something we desperately need in Fremantle to build our 7-day economy. And I also appreciate the fact that the police are trying to create a work environment where they can attract and retain the right employees. They do need a built, fit-for-purpose building. However, categorically, this is the wrong building in the wrong location, and many people in the community have covered this off tonight, so I won't go into too much detail. I expect some of my colleagues may do that also. The key pieces that I do really struggle with myself, and I'm not qualified to comment on architectural design, and I won't, and I never have in this building, but I do acknowledge the architect has had an extremely difficult brief with this site. They have been given a brief to fit probably possibly too much to shoehorn into this site, which is given the complexity of issues that we're dealing with at the moment, and that includes the connectivity. I wondered to myself, if I walk down South Terrace for the next 10, 20 or 50 years, if I live that long, what is this going to be like from this site if I walk from Parry Street to Ray Avenue? Already the hospital we know presents with a very dead zone, and it's not very enticing for residents or tourists to wander and meander the streets and maybe find the Rayo precinct. And that's only going to be compounded by the development of this site. Paul Loring actually covered off on this as well. In terms of it being a dead zone, the only activation may be the police cars screaming in and out of this building across an extremely busy footpath. And what we understand is 20 metres of heritage wall needs to be removed to allow the police to come out in a safe manner if they are travelling at speed, which is actually unacceptable in terms of preserving the heritage walls around Fremantle. The biggest thing, one of the biggest issues I've got here is really the opportunity cost we're looking at for the Oval Precinct. Is what else could be built in this precinct if the land utilisation was looked at more rationally and as a whole. I'm talking about the prison, the entire Oval and the entire hospital site, which is a ginormous land footprint, and arguably you could fit a police station within the existing hospital site. We need to look at this site with a holistic approach to set Fremantle up for the next 100 years and not hamstring us for the next 100 years. There's another note about consultation was raised, and I think we need to be aware that in parallel to this police station being proposed for Fremantle, the government have also been proposing a police station in Baldivis. That police station conducted consultation for the immediate residences surrounding it. They letterbox dropped, they advised the date, they said if you can't make it, please ring this number and someone will come and speak to you. This did not occur in Fremantle, and that's just not good enough in my opinion. So I believe there are better options for this site. and maybe this building can fit somewhere else in Fremantle. I hope we can work constructively to find a win-win solution with the state government.
Councillor Law, would you wish to speak a seconder? I'll wait. Anybody else like to speak? Surely, Councillor Groom.
Yeah, and thanks to Councillor Lang for kicking off the amendment and I think getting it to a place that we're happy with. I wanted to talk to some of the issues that have been raised tonight and I guess some of the sense of frustration in the community that we've given up this land and said, here it is with a ribbon around it, go and build a great big police building, which is not what's occurred at all. So I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit to that because the land is owned by the state government and the city had essentially we were trustees of that land, which means it's vested to us, but turns out the state government can take it back when they want. So they came to us and said, we are going to resume that land for that reason. And so the city then had to go through a process of negotiating the terms of that resumption for the benefit of the city. So it may look on the record like we've supported the use of the land for that purpose. The process the city was going through with the state government was saying, what are the reasonable terms for this land? We've invested in this land. We've had other plans for the land. So on what basis will we kind of agree to give it up and to exit our current terms? And part of that was about negotiating the access to the Oval, to the footy club, to keep the functionality of that. So that's the history of our conversations about that. Through those negotiations, we didn't understand that what would be built on this land was going to be of this scale. So the drawings that have magically appeared in the last few weeks and we've all been asked to comment on were news to council, and that was the first time we saw them when they came into our offices. Who made the decision? It's not a requirement of the state government and it's not something for us, that it was in the best interest of our community that we put that out there, collect the comments and feedback from our community that we could feed them back as part of our response. So it's a disappointing outcome. As Councillor Lang said, we are all supportive of the notion of a district police presence in the city. And the reworded motion talks to that idea that, yes, having that in Fremantle is a good outcome, creates a workforce. The city works really closely with police. We have a range of policing issues in the city and our security staff and police work hand in hand and we support that continued presence and partnership going forward for our city. But none of us are in favour of this development as proposed on this site. We're not particularly in favour of this site being used in that way. We had visions that it was much better suited to housing or student housing, a mixed-use development, something that was really appropriate with that setting on South Terrace and next to the Oval. We do have a master plan for that precinct and it's about real activation of that precinct and bringing residents into the city, which is really critical for our city. But it turns out we don't have a say in that on this piece of land. What we do have a say in and what we're being asked to comment on today with our role as a planning committee is the design of that building against our planning system and against good planning principles. So that's the debate today. And that's the conversation that's gone into our alternative motion. So we are talking to the design of the building, and I know that feels frustrating when it's actually, there's many other issues that will flow on that will impact the community. But the thing that we've got some ability to kind of push back on tonight is those town planning questions. So we are talking about things such as scale and bulk and the impact of that building on the streetscape, because that's the framework that we're able to make a decision in tonight. There may be other conversations the city have about where else could this go, etc., but tonight's conversation is around those planning matters, which I know is frustrating. I can see Paul shaking his head, but that'll be the debate we need to have around this table. So to that end, we have had the opportunity to read the submissions, and my favourite one described this building as looking like a casino. I think that's one of the things that I find really distressing about this proposal, putting aside the heritage impacts. It actually looks like a building that people might want to turn up to because perhaps it's an art gallery or a theatre. It's got that appearance of all this Ritz and razzmatazz, this huge thing at the end of the main street, and they're going to rock up and find out that actually you got to press a button and go through security, get in, and people don't want you anywhere near it. So it's confusing. It's completely the wrong appearance and the wrong function in that really important activated part of our city. So and then on top of that, it's rude in terms of a response to the synagogue and to that whole heritage precinct. It will be visible from the prison forecourt and just this really jarring eyesore in that context. So I'm very comfortable with where we've landed this motion as a way to communicate that. I know that it seems really odd that we've got 7 pages of condition at the end, but whenever we're giving advice to WAPC or JDAP, we have to say, and you'll see the wording of that if they're so minded to approve this, these are all the conditions we want to see. And that's really our process of covering our bases, accepting that there may be a decision that we're not comfortable with and all the things we'd like to see amended if that's the way forward. But for this council, well, certainly, my view, and I'm hoping that council has come to a similar position, is that I would like to see either a total redesign of what's being proposed and a scaling down of that, or that they pick up that building and find somewhere else to put it.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzharding.
Thank you. And I wanted to speak now because I wanted to take the opportunity to make comments immediately after Councillor Groom. I support the alternative recommendation, and given that Councillor Groom's time is also coming to an end with us, I want to acknowledge a little bit of the work that's been done here. I note that it's very easy to say kind of what's popular or what people want to hear, but in doing that you do run the risk sometimes of being credible, being able to actually affect the decision. And what we've been so fortunate in having someone like Councillor Groom in our ranks is to have someone who does the heavy lifting of articulating our concerns in a language that is going to be heard by the decision makers. So as Councillor Groom has said, this is a discussion about planning. It might not be the discussion everyone turned up with a hope of hearing, but if we want JDAP to consider our views about this building, we need to put it in a way that they will understand, and that Councillor Groom's been so valuable to this council and this committee in her ability to do that. I support the amendment because I too am pretty concerned about the scale, the form, the street appearance, particularly the facade and the way that very prominent end of the building sticks up behind the Heritage Synagogue. I think that really doesn't speak to Fremantle and to how we want to see this kind of a building in place. I won't go over all of the elements of the old rec because I think they speak for themselves. A few people have suggested you haven't heard me say very much on this before now. I'd also like to reassure you that neither have elected members, despite what scuttlebutt you might read. Why is that? Because anyone who's been through the rather long and tedious compulsory elected member training will tell you that we should hear the views of the community and the debate in this chamber before we reach our final decision on any matter. So you turning up tonight, and I think the work that's gone into this amendment, alternative recommendation tonight, is a basis for decision making. Anything before this time is premature and so described under our Act. I think I wouldn't want to give the community false hope that this building is going anywhere else. I think this is government land, and while we might want to say we could scare them off, I rather doubt it. The idea of a district police station or a, let's just say, government agency of this scale, I think we can't necessarily be black and white on. I think we have for a long time talked about wanting to get hundreds of government workers back in here when, in fact, the emergency department right next door was downgraded. You know, people still talk about that today as being a huge loss to Fremantle, both in terms of services but also in terms of jobs. So we are trading police cars for ambulances, but I don't think we should assume that everyone in that building will be coming in and out of it in a lights and sirens vehicle. I think we will see that, as with most things, a lot of it is administration, desk workers, people who enjoy buying good coffee, sandwiches, pasta, everything else. In terms of street activation, and I think that is a really important concern, separate discussions with the state government are underway around some of our bus stops in Fremantle that are less than ideal, particularly the one outside the markets. I think one of the things that we could certainly look at there is upgrading the bus interchange at that point, because there is a bit of an opportunity to potentially get a bus stop there that has some passive surveillance, which is an issue at the moment, but also means that there is a place on the, for people there to be on the street, and that doesn't interpret as quite such a dead zone. So that's another piece of work that's underway, but I really acknowledge the hard work that's gone into the alternative recommendation, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'll note that I do have an additional amendment to deal with later, but I think if you're happy, presiding member, to allow the debate to occur and then move the additional amendment after everyone's had an opportunity to speak, if that's okay.
Just remind me if I move to a vote. Yes. Right. Just remind me if I move to a vote before you've done that.
I definitely will. Thank you for that. I wanted to, I guess, pick up on some of the points that were made about the process to date. I've been working on the Fremantle Oval developments probably since the late 1980s and very intensively since 2010. And at the time when the former mayor got a telephone call to say, we've decided we're taking the Stan Riley site back, we were in the middle of the second of a very long planning exercise looking at the whole Oval and Stan Riley precinct that also had a conversation about the future of the Fremantle Hospital area. And we weren't the only agency. So other state government agencies were involved in those conversations, as were sporting groups and the like associated with the Oval. So it literally came out of the blue to be told that the state was taking that piece of land back. And as Councillor Lang continues to talk about, we all thought it was already going to be built on the old Woolstores shopping centre site, which would have been, I think, a very acceptable site for that type of land use. So it really did blindside us, and we're now in version 3 of the Oval redevelopment approach, and that's been incredibly frustrating. And I want to pick up on that towards the end, because I think there is a responsibility that if the state is going to build something like this on this site, that there is a fairly large degree of additional works that they need to do to mitigate the detrimental impact that this particular land use is going to have on that particular larger precinct. And that includes what the detrimental impact it has on the Oval by narrowing the amount of land that we have on the western wing of the Oval, because they took more than just the car park site. They took part of what was actually the Oval precinct as well. I also want to just briefly touch on, I guess, when I first read the recommendation and I saw that this complex has been termed as a civic use, and I'm trying to question everything. So I question that. Is this a civic use? And then I thought about, well, yeah, sure, the front door and the bit where the public get to go in this building is a civic use, but that constitutes a very, very small part of the actual building. It's about 5% of it, maybe. And of course, we don't know the exact detail. The reality is this is a fortified, restricted access office building. And that's, that's fine. Call it what it is. That still has a place in the city. But it's not a civic use on that site. It's not. I think one of the community members penned a really sort of eloquent sort of response or conversation around that, which was very much about, well, what if the ground floor could include a bunch of things which were to do with mental health or community health or some of the sort of outreach stuff. Maybe it could have the Noongar Patrol in there as well. Those sort of things that would be actually community interfacing types of activities would make at least the ground floor a civic use. But unfortunately, policing has got to the point in Australia, I might just single out WA, where this concept is that it is like the Chinese embassy. It needs to be razor wire, it needs to be bomb-proof, it needs to be so removed from the community that it no longer has a civic function. And that's sad. I mean, I actually think it's just genuinely sad from a policing perspective that the old English Bobby approach can't at least still happen on the ground floor where the public could interface with that. I'm not going to change that, obviously, because I think the state, the way policing is done in WA and Australia, is so now entrenched in a model that is difficult to step back from now. But as I said, one of the things that I want to see going forward, if this is approved and is built, and we may not have much sort of control over that, is that the state ought to be looking at what can it do immediately south to sort of mitigate that. The old South Terrace Primary School is a fantastic building that's underutilised. It has an amazing opportunity to be made into a public utilisation, perhaps to do all the things that I just talked about, and be very open to the street and have a major sort of community plaza at that point, that southern gateway to the Oval. But that's not in the mix. We need a state government that recognises that this proposal presents significant problems in the overall town planning of that precinct, and we collectively need to be able to do more to mitigate the impact of this proposal. There are a number of quite challenging things that I know I've had to be challenged by when we were looking at the site for the council's redevelopment, and the heritage wall is a really challenging element, because on the one hand we want to see activation of the streetscape. We want to see that section between the synagogue and Alma Street to feel safer and to be a place where people can walk to the bus stop or walk to South Fremantle and feel like there's not this sort of zone in the middle where it's a little bit scary. So we've always recognised that that was a thing that needed to be overcome, and committees, working groups have been looking at that for years. And when we were looking at the early plans for that, one of the things that was recognised was that you can't, obviously you can't take the wall away. So maybe you have to have a genuine public space behind the wall that acts like a second tier of footpath. Now, that was always what we were considering when we were looking at developments prior to the police station proposal. And of course, it's not included at all in this proposal. And again, it probably is something that is a critical failure. So if you had a combination of activated uses on the ground floor and you had utilisation of space behind the wall that allowed for that sort of like 2 tiers of pedestrianisation, we might actually have a proposal that we could start to support. We don't have that. The issue of the walls, the holes in the walls and the stuff, I mean, the section that is being, the main section that has been pulled down, there are 2 elements. The bit that the WA police want to pull down is the northern bit right next to the synagogue, which was built in 1970 as a replacement to a wall that obviously existed there before. Now, from my perspective, that section of wall can be pulled down, but it still needs to be reinterpreted in a way that genuinely reflects that there was an important heritage element there. I wouldn't just do it in the ground. I'd probably sort of do it, with sections of wall left and sections that were low that you could sit on and the like, to give it a civic function. But that section, I think, is fair game in a heritage sense. in terms of a different way of interpreting that space. The other section, which is at the very southern end, is where we're trying to shoehorn in this new road called Bulldog Lane. Now, that is a really critical element. When council passed its resolution in 2020, we were asking for 18 to 24 metres of road reserve, and we were also asking that the state didn't take the oval land that they've subsequently taken, that they only take the car park land. So pretty well develop on the northern section of the car park. Now, we ended up with 12 metres, and we didn't end up saving the bit of the oval land, which is critical. And that makes, it does mean that there has to be a hole in the wall. You can't have a road built without basically knocking that section of wall down. Now, there might have been different ways of doing it, but unfortunately, that was the best of the worst solutions, in a sense, the worst case scenario that we were having to deal with. That was the element or the degree to which we could claw back something that would help the oval redevelopment. So yeah, it's not the WA Police. I think it's fair to say it's not the WA Police who are calling for the demolition of that wall. It actually comes and generates from a council decision. There are a huge number of other elements which, and I think they've been reasonably well summarised in the amended motion. I won't go into those because they're just bleeding obvious. But the one that really surprises me is this stairwell that's on the very northwestern end of the building that sort of towers over the top of the synagogue. And I looked at that, and before I'd read other architectural submissions, if you like, I just gobsmacked as to why would you do that? I mean, the way the rest of that northern bit of the building is articulated is actually pretty reasonable in terms of its impact on the synagogue. And then suddenly there's this architectural affectation towering over and deliberately going taller and fatter than it needs to do, just to express itself architecturally. That's got to go. And I think hopefully the state design panel will insist on that disappearing as well. I probably said too much, so I'll leave it at that and come back to the amendment. If that's okay.
So Councillor Lorber, we're speaking on the substantive motion, and we'll come back to the amendments later.
Great, thank you. I heard that this was and it's kind of stuck in me it was at the politics in the pub. This is a building designed by police for police, and the police are probably the only people that are really excited about it potentially being built at this location. And that kind of rings true to me because the whole process of this coming before us and before the public was the only consultation that was done in secret. People had to sign non-disclosure agreements to actually participate. And to me, that's not a good public process. I was told by some folks that there was a lot of architects and designers that also were engaged on this project that couldn't make comment because they had been engaged on this project, and they would have liked to have said some things, but they couldn't because they also had to sign non-disclosure agreements as well. And when you have a process that's like that, it's no surprise that we have an outcome that we see before us right now. And this might be fine in a different location in Fremantle. This building might be fine on a green site out in Ellenbrook somewhere where you can just plop a building down. But when you're building in right next to the World Heritage area and you're building in the CBD of Fremantle, we really have to have that engagement from the beginning, that open dialogue. We have to bring our community along because, as everyone said earlier, I mean, we want a police presence in Fremantle. We want a building, but we want it done in a way that respects our city. So I won't go over all the other notes because my colleagues really articulated them very, very well, but I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation before us. And personally, I mean, if this was before us for a decision, I would like to think that we could even go stronger, but I understand that the best way for us to influence the outcome. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
So I'm proposed now to go to Councillor Sullivan's amendment. We can come back to the main motion later if we need to. So would you like to move your amendment?
So I'll move it and hopefully get a seconder.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Groom, would you like to explain?
Yeah, I
It's-
just,
it's one amendment in two parts, is that correct?
It's one amendment. It's got three subsections to it, and it's not. It doesn't amend the main motion, so it's not trying to amend what you've already seen in the main motion. What it's trying to do is to add, if you like, what would normally be considered an advice note if it was a planning approval. So it's sort of a secondary layer of conversation. It's partly there to support our staff in the sort of subsequent negotiations that obviously have to happen. It's primarily focused on the public realm around the police station. So it's all the things where we still have jurisdiction, like, for example, the footpath. So it deals with things like, should they be allowed to pull out the two plane trees next to the synagogue? And what this is saying is, no, you need to work around those trees. There's no reason to pull those trees out. They're 12 metres apart. If you can't get a crossover in between those trees, then you're not really trying hard enough. So leave those trees there, particularly if you're going to build a really, really big building. Having those trees there is probably going to be really important to mitigate the impact of that very big building. So there's a whole range of things that are in there. A lot of these things have already been thought through and discussed by our officers, and even proposed and said to the proponent in many conversations. But I thought, and given the commentary around, oh, we never get to hear what council thinks on these things. Council hasn't said anything about this or that. It's important, I think, for us to actually articulate all of these matters that are a part of the public realm around the development and say, this is our position, this is our strategic frame of the public realm, and we support our officers in their ongoing conversations to try and make sure we get the right outcome in all of those elements. So it does things like, for example, pick up that very comment that I made before about the need for the state to start thinking about ways of mitigating the whole South Terrace precinct and activating that old primary school and the hospital building to the south. So it's picking up all of those integration issues. It picks up the Oval issues. The Oval, because this development has eaten into the land, which was going to be part of the Oval redevelopment, it will mean that the building that gets built on the old South Fremantle Football Club site will be constrained. And constraining it means it will probably go down with a basement and probably be taller than perhaps we would want it to be and can afford it to be. So there's going to be some need to make sure that there is some coordination between the WA Police and that future development. They're building a basement. We're probably going to want to build a basement next door, but they're not building their basement right to the boundary, which is just, from my perspective, it's just, I think the word rude was used before. It's just rude, So we need to convince the state government that need to help us integrate this monstrosity into the overall precinct in a way that actually helps mitigate its impact if it does go ahead. So I'll happily explain any of the particular dot points if other elected members have any questions to ask about them, but otherwise I won't intend to go through each and every one of them.
Any further discussion on the amendments? I think they're fairly straightforward. All happy to vote on the Mayor Fitzhardinge?
Yeah, it's interesting the statement that there were non-disclosure agreements. I'm a member of the Community Reference Group. It does say in our terms of reference, confidential items will be flagged as such, but I never signed an NDA, so let's assume that the police won't come knocking on my door later on tonight when I say this. But some of the most recent public realm work presented in the Community Reference Group does, I think your points, Councillor Sullivan, you've raised through here align with some of the work they have been doing on the public realm and also on the public art strategy. So while we might have quite a monolithic building in the middle, what was presented in terms of what goes around it, retention of trees, public art, etc., hopefully does something to soften and to give some outdoor space around the building that is a little bit more friendly. So I don't think any of the other members attended that community reference group, but it was one, I hope, note of optimism in what has otherwise been, possibly not how we would have done it.
Any further discussion on the amendments? So we're going to move to a vote on the amendments. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. So motion as amended. Is there any further discussion? Just Councillor Lang, you'll be closing if you speak. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, look, I haven't spoken, but I fully agree with the alternative motion by Councillor Lang and Councillor Graham, and I'd like to thank them for their work that they've put into it, and also Councillor Sullivan's amendments. And I'd just like to, with the community here, we have had a lot of discussions on this in council, going back to about January 2021 when we were notified that this was going to be taken over, and a lot of the issues that Councillor Sullivan in particular has amended tonight were discussed back then, and I think a lot of that perhaps has been taken into consideration already. So the council has not been silent on this, let's put it that way. We've been very vocal in what we want, and unfortunately we've been blessed with a monstrosity of a building, and Councillor Grooms explained that tonight of what we're up against. So I'd just like to make those couple of points, and it's certainly not council's doing of what we are discussing tonight, but we have been doing our best to get the best outcome for the community. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll ask Councillor Lang to close. Last chance, yes, Councillor Lang.
I want to be 100% clear, and I don't want to use any conceding language in this discussion about the police station. It's not too late for the government to reassess this decision. That's really frank. Sure, they've spent money on Ford Works, but that can be repurposed into other development. The intent is good, the proposal is flawed, and it's going to inhibit this pocket of Fremantle for many years to come. We don't need to actually look too far to see the benefits of well-planned and integrated developments. Think about this building we're sitting in at the moment and how well it integrates into this whole block with the FOMO building next door. Two developments done together that talk to each other. The police station or a hospital site, the whole Oval Precinct needs that kind of large strategic thinking for the benefit of Fremantle, and also for the benefit of the hospital and for the benefit of the police station. I think if we're spending $100 million, I think we seriously should consider going back to the drawing board to make sure we're getting value for money for it. Interesting quote here I was going to insert. This is what I really want to communicate about my government. We're about listening to people, working with the community to produce good outcomes. That was Roger Cook a couple of weeks ago. I really hope Roger is listening right now, because 100% of our community survey participants don't like the proposal in front of us. And it also looks like the Fremantle Planning Committee don't like the proposal in front of us. So I really hope that we can get the state government back to the table on this item to discuss the best and most strategic way forward for the police and for Fremantle. Thanks.
Thank you. Just before moving to a vote, I just want to ask the manager, will anybody that's put in a written submission automatically be notified about JDAP, or do they need to make some other contact? Sorry, it's not working. Have we got anybody?
The Department of Planning should be issuing invites to the DAP meeting when it's scheduled, so it's not scheduled just yet. We'll be making that very clear to them, and if they advise us that they're not going to, we'll make sure we do. We'll update the MySay page as well, so everyone's informed about when that meeting is.
Sorry, we're going to vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour? So that's unanimous, thank you. We'll just pause for a minute if people are only here for that item. We'll just pause for a minute while they leave. If you're interested in the rest of the agenda, please stay. The next item will be the South Terrace Tavern. And they've got Declan Cryan, is it? Declan Cryan. got Declan Cryan. Is that is it here? You here? Yeah. If you like, just come up to the lectern. We'll start in a minute, just as soon as they finish. Okay, so this is on the item 2, the South Terrace 3-storey tavern. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Declan, and I'm a town planner from Urbis. Urbis is representing the proponent for the 37th South Terrace Tavern DA. I'm speaking in favour of the officer recommendation tonight. I promise I'll keep it as brief as I can, just speak to the key items and available to answer any questions after. Just as a bit of a brief overview, this is a really exciting proposal for a key site in Fremantle. The site has sat vacant for a number of years now, and this proposal shows there's a real interest to invest in Fremantle. The Cappuccino Strip is known as a thriving and bustling hospitality area, and this proposal will add to that offering and activate a key corner site. Woods Bagot, the project architects, have carefully considered and refined the design. The proposal considers the heritage precinct and makes a positive contribution to the locality. We've worked really hard with the city officers and the DAC to iron out some of the key issues, and we feel the proposal is now in a strong position for support. I do want to highlight that the design of the building factors in a rooftop element, and the opportunity for a rooftop bar in Fremantle, another rooftop bar in Fremantle, is really exciting. We anticipate this will become a much loved Fremantle venue, be really well used, and particularly in this summer and warmer months. We're really pleased with the officer recommendation for approval. However, we do note that condition 5 seeks to remove the awning structure. The awning structure is critical to the comfort and usability of the rooftop space. As I'm sure everyone has experienced with other rooftop bars without adequate sun protection, rooftop bars in Perth can be quite uncomfortable. We appreciate there are some concerns with some of the detail of the awning, things like operability, colours, materiality, that sort of thing. But we'd be happy to refine this to get the right outcome for the site. We do understand that there's an alternate motion put forward to amend condition 5, and as we understand it, this seeks a bit of extra detail for the awning to ensure it's lightweight, it doesn't have an overbearing impact from the street, those sorts of things. We're absolutely willing to work with council to get the right outcome here. And specifically, we'd like to get a bit of a sense of some of the preferences for things like the colours, the materials, and that sort of thing, but certainly willing to work towards the right outcome. I'm happy to discuss that at the right time as well, but getting the right look and feel is certainly a priority for the proponent. So to sort of summarise and conclude, this is a fantastic opportunity to activate an underutilised site in the city centre. It will breathe new light into a key entryway to South Terrace. We do accept that there's a little bit more work to be done on the awning structures, but we are willing to work towards the right outcome. An amendment to condition 5 will keep the awning, but refine the design and have a really good outcome for the community. We're supportive of this motion, and we hope that elected members can put forward a strong recommendation for approval to the JDAP. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant's representative? Okay, thank you. We'll move into committee. So I will move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Graham. There is an amendment, but we'll see if there's any. Would you like to move the amendment first? That was Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Groom both had amendments. They were very similar, and I think we agreed that we were going to do Councillor Sullivan's. Is that correct? Yeah. So Councillor Sullivan,
yes.
perhaps you'd like to move, and Councillor
So
Groom.
I'll move that and invite Councillor Groom
perhaps
to
you'd like to second. Yeah. Okay. So this is the amendment about the awning.
Thank you, Chair. Both Councillor Groom and myself came to essentially the same conclusion that while there is some concern about the impact of the awning in the streetscape, it's not, it's not at the sort of outrageous, serious sort of end of the scale. It's a fairly subtle impact, but it is also an element of the roof deck that is essential to the functioning of the roof deck. And I want to compare it to a position I had on the National Hotel roof deck years ago, and they kind of wanted to do some similar things. And based on that building, because it was a heritage building, we basically said, no, you can't do it because the impact was on a heritage building. This is not that same scenario. what ended up happening at the National Hotel, and you can see it from the street, is the umbrellas went up. And so instead of having a building with a sense that there was perhaps an inappropriate awning up there that was creating like a fifth story, we now end up with this sort of weird looking building with umbrellas on the top of it. And I think the exact same thing would happen in this scenario. The awnings are essential, I think, if the rooftop bar is going to function. We want it. We want the things that are built in the city to function well. If I felt that the awnings were beyond the pale in terms of their impact on the streetscape, I wouldn't be moving an amendment to have them supported. Having said that, I think they can be improved. They need, they essentially are a lightweight structure, or potentially a lightweight structure that has a minimal impact visually from the ground. But as architects know, there are so many different tools in your kit bag that can be used to make something float even more, to make something disappear more than it might. So things like coloration, if you paint something white, it will stand out. If you paint something black, it will disappear more. It's just a standard treatment. So a dark color is going to be better than a light color. If you end up with what they currently have, which are louvered blades, if you like, the sort of solar blades that you see in domestic scenarios quite often. But the issue or the concern is that, well, when they're closed, it's basically like an old-fashioned flat veranda, the hot tin roof, and it will read far more heavily than if it was just something that had a few slats running through it. So there's just those concerns that the materiality, the coloration of it, the configuration of it could be significantly improved to give an outcome that was genuinely floating up there and disappearing as far as reasonably possible. I think that's what the drawings kind of indicate, but I think both Councillor Groom and I sort of looked at the detail and went, yeah, but that's not actually what's getting delivered, and we need to be really, really clear that it needs to be improved to get the best outcome delivered. Thanks.
Councillor Groom, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, certainly similar lines, but the other thing that was really important to me was that if we are creating rooftop spaces, those spaces that are functional in our climate, that recognise the importance of sun protection, that keep them functional in winter so we don't kind of wipe them out for half the year, having invested in the space in the first place. But I do believe there are many solutions that would create a kind of a more permeable outcome that sort of doesn't end up as a dark, fully solid roof that looks like the underside of a carport from the street. So it's really about driving a very, very elegant, effective outcome. And I'm not comfortable with a kind of amendment that would leave that off, but an amendment that absolutely invites the proponent back to the table. So it's pretty simple.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, we'll move to a vote. This is on the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. On the motion as amended, any further discussion? Okay, so all those in favour. Sorry, Councillor Groom, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I want to speak a little bit to the proposal in front of us. When I first looked at it, I just thought it was really boring and a bit disappointing, but that's pretty unfair. It is a really clever response to the street, and it's, looking at the police station, I have to say to myself, careful what you wish for. I do love the effort that's gone into the big verandas and coming up with something that will sit on the corner quite comfortably with everything around it. Would I have liked something that maybe brought some new built form into that space, because it is quite, it looks like the Sail and Anchor in a lot of its proportionality and so forth. But I do commend the applicant for the work they've done to get a solution that sits into our streetscape so well that it's going to look comfortable, if not outstanding. And I understand there's been a lot of work with officers, a lot of back and forth to get to that solution. So again, credit to our officers and the DAC for where they've landed this. I'm not overwhelmed by another big pub in Fremantle, and I think there's been a bit of kind of email traffic between councillors about that. Not quite sure how it is a sports bar because there's no rooms for room on the walls for screens, but I'm not going to argue with that. It's a good thing. So yeah, I've got mixed feelings. Everyone around this table wants to see the Hungry Jack site fixed up. So yeah, do welcome this proposal and acknowledge the effort that's gone into getting there.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. But that's JDAP, isn't it? Yeah. So, and we do have a date for that. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. 4 James Street. Pete Adams to speak in favour of the recommendation. This is residential and short stay accommodation. Number 4 to 6 James Street. You have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all the councillors for letting me talk tonight. For those who don't know me, I'm Pete Adams of Yoke Property Group, the developer of this application. I'll keep this fairly brief. I'm also joined in the audience by Phil from Stacel Architects and Chris and Declan from Urbis Planners, who can answer any detailed questions that you may have. 4 to 6 James provide an opportunity to deliver a unique take on a housing typology that's underrepresented in the state. The small lot townhouse provides several functions. It fills an important void that exists between the full-size family home and an apartment. It also adds to the much-needed density in our centres. This approval has been run hand in hand with a 6-lot subdivision that has recently been approved by the West Australian Planning Commission. The summary of this, as you say, is it's a 6-lot development consisting of 5 3-bedroom, 2 car bay townhouses with a rooftop deck, and a 6-room micro short stay dwelling with a common area and also a rooftop deck. The architect's response to our brief has been exceptional. They have taken into account not just the short-term surrounding development, but also what can be built to the north and the west of the site in the future. We worked very closely with the DAC, the City of Fremantle's Design Advisory Committee, over 3 meetings. We carefully considered their comments and incorporated most of them in the design. The design captures natural light and provides opportunities for natural ventilation. It maximises amenity for not just the occupant, but also the public realm. We'll also note we have an agreement in principle with the city landscape team to add 4 extra trees by the replacement of 2 of the existing trees with 6 new trees. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the applicant? No, thank you. And Declan's here to answer questions, but not to speak. So if there are any questions, ask them now. No. Okay, I'll move the recommendation, which is for approval. Is there a seconder? Oh, sorry, you are correct. Philip Nichols? Yes, sorry.
Hello, I put in instead of 200, I put in the only submission for this property. I'm not finished already, am I? Right, okay. However, I put in a submission. A few days later, I amended my submission, but the first submission went through, not the second submission, although I asked the planning department to delete the first one. However, the second submission was less positive than the first submission. You have a copy over there. Okay, I don't expect you to read it. Now, okay, basically, we were concerned, about putting 6 buildings opposite us, where every building is the width of 2.5 car bays. Okay, it's very tight, it's very small. I think the density codes have been amended, and with respect to the other codes, we really are unhappy about the other codes. The gentleman has just replied to the tree problem, which was one of our questions. Thank you. The company addressed our issues, which in our first submission, okay, we accept that, but in our second submission, when we weren't so positive, obviously they haven't addressed them because they didn't get them. Okay, the other point which we're not happy with is the parking. They're chained on the micro stay apartment. There should be 2 bays. The planning committee have said no, it's all right. There don't need to be any bays because there's sufficient parking. You try and park in our street in the day. It's impossible. There is not sufficient parking in Quarry Street. Okay, the recommendation about open space. The planning code wants 30%. They're giving 2.5%. That's 27.5 difference in the amount of open space. You're sardining they're sardine cans pushed into a tiny car park. Basically, I think overall we are against it. For that reason, we live opposite. There was another point in my second submission, which about the aesthetics. And it was just one thing to reduce the boxiness of the structure. One possible improvement could be to round off the corner to complement the corner of Caledonian Hall opposite, just to improve the appearance a little bit. Of course, that hasn't been addressed because it wasn't received. And I've timed it quite well. Thank you for listening to me. I very much doubt if it'll change anything, but thank you.
Oh, so you're in the house immediately opposite, is that correct?
Sorry?
You're in the house immediately opposite?
Indeed.
On course, thank you.
Sorry.
Any questions?
I just wondered if one of the other speakers from the proponent side would be able to address any of those concerns that were raised on the spot.
Any ones in particular? So,
I guess the open space. I think the trees were already addressed. The visual aspect.
so
If they
anybody from the
so desire, I mean, it's not.
Anybody would like to try and address the question of open space? I'm not sure where the 30% came from. Can the officers explain that?
So I think what the gentleman was referring to is the deemed to comply requirement. So they are seeking a discretion, but there's multiple floors of.
So that's the open space for each dwelling, not
level.
for each dwelling, not the open space for
Yep.
anybody else. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, would like to try and address
Chris Nolan from Urbis. I think the officers responded appropriately in terms of the open space. Traditionally, as it's, I guess, measured by the R codes, yes, it is relatively light on, but each dwelling is going to have the 2 balconies that are rather generous. And obviously the rooftop deck as well. So this is an alternative form of living. These are small homes. As Pete said, this is pretty unique, not just to Fremantle, but to Western Australia. The WAPC have approved these lots at I think 80 square metres or the like. But hand in glove have assessed not just the subdivision, but the development application as well. So both the officers and the WAPC are comfortable that, yes, whilst not ticking the standard boxes within the R codes, that each dwelling will have sufficient open space, but in I guess, a non-traditional form. Obviously, in the rooftop deck, complementing that as well.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. Okay, I will move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Is a seconder? Councillor Graham. Is there any discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I acknowledge the concerns of the residents over the road, and it is the precinct is in a sense set up to have a relatively jarring transition between what are single-storey traditional heritage buildings on one side of the street for much of Quarry Street, not all of it, but much of it. And modern development on the other side. It was deliberately trying to use the building heights on that new side of Quarry Street to try and sort of scale down and mitigate the impact of what are obviously much bigger buildings facing Queen Victoria Street. And you can see that in the Live Apartments and further down at the southern end of Quarry Street, where we get sort of 2 and 3 story buildings and the like. This is an incredibly difficult site. This is way more difficult than any of the other ones that have been developed so far, because one, it's very small, but two, it doesn't have the benefit of having a development site that extends from Queen Victoria Street through to Quarry Street, where you can play around with courtyards and the like. So it's effectively a site where it would have all been almost impossible to gain northern aspect, reasonable northern sunshine. And I sort of, it's produced an architectural response that is difficult to understand initially, has some incredibly sort of interesting vertical spaces in the building and skylights and ways to try and bring light and livability back into buildings, which are, for all intents and purposes, three-sided boxes with a small aspect out to the street. So it has been done incredibly cleverly. It also reminds me and contrasts with a development that we recently had in Amherst Street, where we have a subdivision approval already. We have blocks which are 6 meters, 7 meters wide, whatever, just over 6 meters, and we have sort of garages, if you like, parking coming off the street to each and every one of those. Where this is completely different and where it is contrasting to that development, and why I will support it, is that instead of having a double garage, which it probably could have done, it has a single garage. But not only that, it sets the actual enclosed bit of the garage back to the back part of the block, and it's created this elegant space around the front door and around the second car bay and around the opportunity for landscaping that is, if you like, a interpretation of the old front garden, the old transitional zone between a front fence and the front door that you would see on the other side of the street. And it creates a spot where the residents of these dwellings can feel part of the community, because there will be interaction. They won't just be driving into the garage, pulling the garage door down and living behind it. They will be interacting in the way that residents over the road do as well. So before I lose my voice, I really wanted to emphasise that I think that they've done an amazing job of fitting in a proposal like this that delivers quality development on a really challenging site.
I've got some fishermen's friends, if you'd like some. Councillor Groom.
Yeah, probably Councillor Sullivan might have stolen a bit of my thunder, but I did really want to acknowledge the thought that's gone into this design, and the fact that it is something, it's a really different product. It is going to be hard for people to understand, and so that's brave for everyone involved in the project, but it's also exciting. It's not a proposal we would necessarily approve in the suburbs. I think they're, the open space solutions we would be looking for more, but in the city of Fremantle, as an alternative to stacked apartments, I think it is interesting, and I welcome this experiment on this little site that starts to open the door for, other ways of doing housing around the city, and maybe inviting some new investment in. So, yeah, really pleased to support this proposal.
Lorva?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Councillor Sullivan and Groom for pointing out the not just the similarities, but the differences between this and what was happening out on Amherst Street in the Knutsford Street precinct. Because while at first glance they may appear similar, like you guys have said, it really is going to be an interesting outcome, hopefully, for this site. Personally, I think it's more of a Quarry Street project than a James Street one, but that's just, you know, when you look at it, they'll all be fronting Quarry Street. So it'll be interesting to see what the addresses finally wind up being. Yeah, I'm excited to support the officer's recommendation on this one.
Further discussion?
Basically, just got a ditto on that. The comments made by others, and I think we do have to, in the sort of broader CBD precinct, accept that, you know, it's incumbent on the city to provide things like places for parking, and we know parking in a lot of the streets can get a lot challenging at the moment. But you know, this one does have the leisure centre car park within a very short distance, and one would hope with a short stay that would be advertised to people as being the place where you park. And I believe there's a permit included in the short stay use. So I do think we have to be quite proactive about the idea that infill does bring people. That's exactly what we want it to bring. Sometimes people bring cars. Hopefully, mainly they don't. But where they do, we need to provide a little bit for them. And also the importance of public green space and you know, where roof decks and those sort of solutions are great and allow people to get a foothold and live in Fremantle. The vicinity to public green space is also a key consideration in how we maintain and, you know, make accessible that public green space is another challenge that comes back on us. Thanks.
Any further comments? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous by delegation tonight. Thank you very much. Item 5 is the High Street change of use to tavern. I've got Phil Thompson to speak. Just want maybe pause for a minute whilst people leave, and then we'll come back to you in a minute. Actually, maybe we'll take the people opposed to it first. If you prefer, then you'll have an opportunity to respond to them. So I've got Jeanette Anderson. You want to oppose the recommendation?
Not in its entirety. Good evening, councillors. Whilst I support the proposal, the concept, one thing has to be taken into consideration, and that is the acoustics, and more specifically about the rooftop. It's the first level terrace. That terrace is in fact within metres of residents' beds. So when you go to bed tonight, if you would like an establishment that's, you know, it's a social establishment like a pub or a winery, I think it is going to be, right in your bedroom more or less. That's how it will impact on the residents of our building. It says that there's going to be a retractable awning, and that it will be closed at 10 o'clock of an evening. The residents are very concerned about this particular patio use, because it's going to have a lot of noise from human impact noise and entertainment and music. And it's right where right next door, it's a residential building, solely residential, where all the bedrooms face out onto High Street. And I think we will be negatively impacted because of the patio area. So the rest of the development, we pretty much, I think the issues have been ironed out, but it's very much the first level patio area. I think it's too close to where people sleep and reside, and you know, if you want to encourage more people living in the city, I think there has to be some separation of entertainment and people's bedrooms and living areas. So that's essentially my very strong objection on that particular issue. But essentially, the rest of it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Groom.
Sorry, are you referring to the ground floor area? Because you're talking about a first floor patio, and I can't see that on what we've got.
Yes,
So
it's the current building. Well, that used to be Mother.
Yeah.
So you walk in, and it's there's a doorway and windows either side, and then there's a sort of a flat roof. And I'm not too sure what happens beyond that. But initially, if you go to your attachments, the photographs 90 on page 94 and 95, photographs 1 and 2, you can see the flat where it is, and it's literally you can see it just from the footpath. It's just 1 story up.
but is there a
So just confirming, what you're really saying is your concern is that at the front of the building, they're going to open the roof up above it and have a retractable awning over what is the current space at the front of the building.
Yes.
That's
And
so,
there will be,
but it's the ground floor space. But you're concerned that because their roof above it is retractable, that the units the noise will go from that open space up to the units.
No, the patio will be used. It will be 1 story from my.
So there is only a ground floor proposal for the tavern. The area at the rear of the building, which is already a first floor, it remains as it is. But there is no first floor in the tavern.
No, yes, that's right. That's right. It's a roof at the moment.
Yeah, it's a roof that's gone from being a solid roof to one that's going to be a retractable roof and then closed at a certain time.
Yeah, but as you can see, the proximity. I mean, the proximity to bedrooms is extremely close.
I think we were just trying to clarify to make sure that we understood what your concern was clearly, and I think we all do. So yeah, it's just that when you say that was a deck at the first level, well, there is no first level in the sense, but
Currently, it's single level. If you're looking from the footpath, yes.
That's fine. I was just trying to get it clarified so that there was no misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Do we? Councillor Graham, had you finished your question? We're on questions at the moment to the neighbour. Anybody? Okay, thank you. We'll get the applicant to address that too. Miss Dr. Raul Garola, is it? Did you wish to? And you're also a neighbour.
Yes, I am. Hi, thanks a lot. And one thing I want to register is I only found out 24 hours ago that this was happening, so I'm sorry I didn't formally prepare comments. I have spoken to the proprietor in person, and I did actually give some suggestions for things that could actually work for those of us that are neighbors to the proposed wine bar. And I myself am a fan of wine, so I have no problem with having wine. But I do have to admit that as a person who does live in this building and with this proposed establishment right next to what would be one of the units that I live in, I'm worried that that would impact literally the way I sleep, because although I like wine, I still have to get up in the morning and go teach my classes and have my responsibilities as a public servant, just like you all are. So I'm here actually not to necessarily go back on the questions that I wrote in my submission, because I do think my concerns have been resolved, and I have spoken to the proprietor about a couple of the things that I wrote. But the first question is actually more of a concern, and I'm here to represent my housemate and my neighbors that couldn't be here, because we're very concerned that if it isn't soundproof or if it is loud and there are social events happening up until midnight. And I'll be honest, I am a night owl, so I do often read and write late at night and prepare for my classes. However, I do have to admit that I'm concerned, along with my neighbors and my housemate, that the noise could impede our well-being and sleep, literally, and the ways that we have to conduct our responsibilities the next day in our jobs and in our own civic duties. That's beyond people that are blow-ins or transients that are coming in for a glass or two of wine. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that everyone saw this picture, just to make it. You want to see it?
Pass it over
Oh,
here,
yeah.
please. Sorry, Jeanette, I didn't understand you wanted to read a statement from another. I thought you were speaking for both of you. You want to read a statement from Ian Tubbs, who's also a resident. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Ian Tubbs was unable to attend this evening, so he's asked me to address the council. He says, unfortunately, I cannot attend the meeting tonight, or so forth, etc. So he's asked me to speak on his behalf. He's concerned about the retractable roof being the retractable roof being approved. This is because our apartments at 185 High Street will look straight into the building. If the current roof is removed and replaced by a retractable one, I am not alone with this concern, as many others from 185 High Street have voiced the same concern. I do understand that the developers have significant experience with the exact same retractable roof and with their other property, the local hotel, state that they have had no issues with noise. This is not the local hotel. This is an apartment that has its main bedrooms within 10 metres or less in some instances of the proposed roof opening, and a balcony not far away either. The drone of voices, the noise of chairs and tables scraping the floor will be simply unacceptable. I have been chatting to and working with Phil and Roscoe from the development, along with the owners of the JLU Apartments, the new owner and of the old Premier Piano site, as well as the general manager of Victoria Hall regarding the Fanos Lane access. I think we have worked well as a group to ensure the free transit of traffic in the lane. What I now ask is that very serious consideration be given to not permitting the retractable roof to be open next to our bedrooms. This will save a lot of noise complaints going forward. Thank you. On behalf of Ian
Thank you.
Tubbs.
Any questions, Councillor Lang?
I have a quick question. With the existing restaurant that's in place, or was in place, what noise could you hear from the dining and the chairs and these things that were?
No, it wasn't because the roof never opened, so that wasn't an issue.
So closed roof, no noise.
Yeah, there wasn't an issue, and I mean, you know, I think in their submission, the developers stated that there was antisocial behaviour, but as a resident who faces out onto High Street, the antisocial behaviour is sort of around the time that the bottle shop opens of a morning, and it's very short. It's very short and sharp, and it doesn't go into midnight or anything like that, you know, or 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night. And I mean, we're very concerned about this. We want to live in the city. We want to be part of it, but we don't want it sort of right in our bedrooms kind of thing. You know, I think it's an exciting development all the same.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thanks. We'll take that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I will be a patron. And incidentally, they propose up to 400 patrons attending this place. So it's not small. Yes, and I will be one of them.
Right, thank
but
you.
Not on the rooftop.
So Phil Thompson is the proponent. Perhaps you could address some of those issues in the time you have.
Jeanette, thank you. Yeah, thank you, councillors. As was mentioned, we've had some pretty productive discussions so far with our neighbours, with Ian as well, on a range of subjects, and obviously the retractable roof is probably the biggest sticking point today. As mentioned, we are the proprietors of the local hotel also, so we are, I guess, well versed in working within a sensitive community, and I believe we've done a great job in the last 8 years at the local to, you know, have strong community relations with our nearest neighbours, and I hope to do the same with you guys as well. And I believe we can work together to achieve that. The retractable roof is, we believe essential to what we want to do. It gives an indoor-outdoor aspect to it. We put our own restrictions on how we will use that, and we believe that in that way we can mitigate problems. I guess there was mention of a 400 capacity and things like that, and yes, that is a maximum capacity, but we don't see ourselves running at that level very often, I guess, and most weekdays would be far, far below that. With the retractable roof, the way it works, it's not something that has to be completely open all the time or will be completely open all the time. It's something that if we feel that, we can even have it set on volume that it closes at a certain point. We understand that there are neighbouring, I guess, balconies above us, and just to reiterate, we're not on the first floor, it is definitely ground floor. We have no plans for anything above the ground floor. So I'd just like to make that really clear. Now, as mentioned, we do have experience with it. We have experience with neighbours who have bedrooms, living rooms overlooking our operation at the local hotel. On all sides. As I drove here tonight, I sort of noted the amount of people out the front of the local, Percy Flint's across the road, excuse me, and Rocco's Pizza, all, I guess, with direct facing neighbours. And I feel it is possible to, I guess, coexist. And I do feel on an inner city level, especially so, I think that's, we can make that work. Is there any further questions on that?
I've just got a quick question. The retractable roof that you have at the local, and that is on a shared boundary within a residence behind it.
Yes.
How do you manage that if there is it's too loud, or what do you do in that scenario?
Basically, we close it. Yeah. If the feeling is that the room's loud and we've closed it in the daytime, we'll close it. And yeah, we basically manage. And part of what we've always tried to do is be a good neighbour. We don't want to make anyone's life bad, or we want to protect your amenity. We want to improve the streetscape. We want the East End to thrive. So doing something that's going to adversely affect our neighbours is not part of our plan.
Councillor Over, do you wish to speak, or is it your lot? Yep.
Thanks. So just a quick question. And I think we'd be really hard pressed to find someone to say that the local hotel hasn't integrated itself into the community, even though when it was first proposed, there may have been a lot of concern. I guess, as an operator, I mean, you venture even to say you've proven that you're willing to go the extra mile to make that integration harmonious. You may not always be the owner of the site, and so when we're considering here as before us, and I guess part of the concern that I heard from the residents and tonight and even earlier is the length of time that roof could be opened. And just curious if that was shortened to, let's hypothetically say 8 o'clock or even 7:30, or set to a noise volume level. Is that like a potential amendment that you would be willing to consider, or is it 10 o'clock a hard and fast thing?
Absolutely willing to work with council and the neighbours to reach an agreeable position on that. We're very open to working that.
In the report, it does reference an acoustic report in point 5 on page 117. Does that actually talk about opening hours at which the roof can be opened? Maybe the officers would.
117 in front of me. It does have basically all openings closed by 10 o'clock is what's in the application. However, like I said, willing to work with council on that. And
would the officers like to comment on that? That's correct. Okay. So all windows, doors, and retractable roof openings to be closed no later than 10 o'clock. Okay. All right. We'll Any further, Councillor Solomon?
Yeah, thank you. Condition 4 talks about minimum attenuation of RW45 for the roof and ceiling structures. My interpretation of that condition is that would apply to retractable roof as well. Is that something you've done some research on as to whether you can build a retractable roof that gives that very high level of noise attenuation, or do you interpret that condition differently? Or
No, but I have been having conversations with our retractable roof supplier about how we achieve that. And there's a number of solutions which might be double layering. But yeah, if that's the condition that's set out, then obviously that we will comply with all conditions.
So Councillor Groom probably has to switch hers off. But if that's the case, then if the condition is applied, the solid roof and the retractable roof should achieve the same level of attenuation. Is that your understanding? Because it's my understanding of what the conditions are trying to achieve.
Yep.
So that's something that you will be looking to work with.
Yes.
And if it's a one layer of retractability or 2 layers or whatever has to happen, that's what would be what you would seek to obviously do, because you'd have to do it to comply with that condition.
Yeah.
So it's probably, I don't know whether this is a question for you or the officers, so have a quick look. So I've just had a very quick scan of the acoustic report and I can't see any mention of the retractable roof in the acoustic report. Do you know if that was in your briefing to the consultants?
It was,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's not, it's not
further.
referenced at any point. So it talks about management of doors and windows, but it doesn't talk about that roof. So just flags a concern for me about our understanding of its performance and impact. No? Yep. Do you have any different?
Yeah, because it wasn't clear in the report, I think the discussions we had with the applicant was that that's definitely the intent, and our EHOs have sort of looked at it and gone, yep, that roof should be capable of doing that. That 10 o'clock time is when things need to come down in volume, which is why the doors and the windows have to be closed as well. So in talking to the applicant, yeah, their intention is to close everything up. And that's why the condition is quite specific in saying the roof structure as well. So if they do need to go back to their acoustic consultant, work with their building contractors to find the right solutions, they need to comply with that condition and comply with the noise regulations regardless of any conditions down on this application.
Any further questions? Okay, we'll move into committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to clarify from the officers, the condition 4 is in addition to the normal acoustic requirements for any premises. It's more stringent.
It's really making it explicit exactly what we want in there, so they have to comply with that acoustic report. But because there was that little bit of ambiguity about is that including the roof as well, we wanted to make it extremely explicit that the roof being closed was in addition to the windows, the doors, and the work. So they've advised us that that report does include all of that, but we wanted to make sure that it did.
I'll move the officer's recommendation for approval. Is there a seconder? The Mayor, thank you. Mayor Fitzhardinge. Any discussion? Councillor Groom.
I'm sort of uncomfortable about that condition, and I'm uncomfortable about, we've heard this conversation, and I'm not doubting the willingness to act in good faith, but how we consider that as a condition. I certainly, I'm not that comfortable with the 10 o'clock, and I don't know whether it's a minor amendment to amend that time or if there's some other way to reflect the intended outcome. So really, it's a question how we might go about that.
I'll probably answer a question with a question through you, Chair. Just need to know exactly what it is that you're after, whether it's the roof you want the roof to be closed earlier, or you want that separated out from the acoustic report so that's an additional requirement. I think we probably just need to clarify that. And if it's not able to be worked through here and now, perhaps it's a referral to ask the applicant to provide an updated acoustic report and confirmation from their consultant that it all does include it.
sorry, backwards, forwards question. So I'm probably of a mind to bring forward the time with the understanding that maybe if the consultant can, if the applicant can later provide other ways that are agreeable to people of managing that outcome, that could be negotiated. Yep, like I don't, because it's policy on the run, I'm a bit nervous about locking in a kind of adverse outcome, but that 10 o'clock.
Does it help to refer it to council to allow further work or further discussion of the? We will allow that given the circumstances. It's not normal, but yep. You're the acoustic consultant or something? No.
No, sorry. My name's Ross McPherson. I'm Phil's business partner in this little outing. I think that furthermore to what's been discussed, there are the environmental health have stipulated noise limits that we're allowed to reach at given times throughout the day. And as was mentioned, they come down at 10. I think they come down at 7:30 first is the first set down. So regardless of whether this is an opening roof or let's just say Manuka Wood-Fired Kitchen have seating outside for dining as we do at the local. So irregardless of the roof or not, we have to stick to those limits. Otherwise, if we go over those limits, we're breaking the law. So really for us, we are very mindful of that. And as we have been at the local, if things get too loud, like even a beautiful afternoon, if the football's on and the room's full, Phil always closes the roof. Like first and foremost, he is very much about, the locals' amenity. And we are in a very sensitive space there as well with neighbours. So sorry, back to my point, environmental health states that we have to stick to those limits at nearest residents, and we will absolutely be doing that. We're not asking for any exemptions or any, leeway on those things. Yep. Thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Sullivan, is there a question or a?
Well, I can, deal with the questions first. Essentially, in condition for the first dot point, did officers intend that to apply to the roof, the ceiling structure, including the retractable roof?
Yes.
So adding those words would be essentially what you would interpret and be applying in any case?
Yes.
Or should we insert the words in the first dot point then to say roof, ceiling structure and retractable roof? Just to clarify that. Is that where you're heading?
It is, and I'll speak to that in a second, because if we have that inclusion, for me, the issue of time is irrelevant, and I'd like to speak to that. But I think you need to have the clarity that the entire roof, irrespective of whether there are bits of it that are opening and bits of it that aren't, is going to perform as one when it's closed, because that's the critical issue.
So would you like to move that, some change to dot point, the first dot point in 4?
Yeah, I think, it's just a minor amendment to actually
including
ensure that it is clear that what the officers intended is what's actually...
minimum attenuation for the roof, ceiling structure and retractable roof. I'll take that as a minor amendment. Is everybody happy with that? I don't think that needs to be voted on.
No, it needs to be voted on, but you have to accept it as a minor amendment.
Well, I will accept it, yes, but it seemed more of a drafting amendment to me, but we'll move it and second it if you want to do that. Seconded by Councillor Lawver, moved by Councillor Sullivan. Do we need any discussion? Okay, all those in favour? That's unanimous, so that's amended. Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
So I'd like to talk about having done that. For me, as soon as you create a roof structure in its entirety that deals with the acoustic requirement that the officers have, gone through and say this is what it needs to be. It's a fairly onerous thing. I've done roof structures that open and close. They're not easy to do to start with, and I imagine it'll be a real challenge for the applicant to find that solution. But that's the planning condition. I mean, and that's what the officers were intending. And so it will be like it is now after 10 o'clock at night, because that's what the planning condition is saying. It will be better than it is now after 10 o'clock at night from the noise that mother produced, simply by the fact that I'm sure the current roof probably doesn't achieve RW45, and this is actually requiring it to achieve a higher level of acoustic buffering between what happens in the building and what happens or what gets out of the building and heads up. And for that reason, if that is achievable and is required to be achieved, then the issue of time for me should just be what we would normally do, which is, even in the suburbs, that the 10 o'clock curfew, if you like, of outdoor dining and those sort of things is enforced. And that is where, that 10 o'clock curfew is where we've got ourselves into trouble before. I've never received significant complaints about anything before 10 o'clock, but I have received complaints about al fresco areas, whether they be on the street or whether they be inside a development. And I'm thinking of a one development close to the local, but not the local, that breaches that all the time, and it's problematic. But if it's contained in the box, and the box deals with these acoustics, 10 o'clock is a perfectly reasonable time, even in a suburban environment, let alone a city centre environment. So I don't think we should start imposing sort of randomly different times. It's the time the state government accepts as this is the time where you drop down a whole bunch more in terms of sound. It's perfectly reasonable, and it's not even sort of adopting a sort of a hospitality precinct approach. It's basically an approach that would be applied in the suburbs equally. It's been applied in the city centre. There are parts of the city where we would probably accept more noise, but that having an apartment building that looks straight down into this is not one of those places. The potential that there will be apartment buildings over the road, that's what we want to see. So we do need to be a little bit careful in this East End area that we get the right balance between living in a building and the livability of the place. And you guys know that it will be a nice venue. It will make that area better, and hopefully it will bring in and attract more development. But it does need to respect that it's primarily a residential area, or it's a mixed-use area, but it's going to have a lot of residential in it. So I think if that's achieved, I'm absolutely confident that the outcome will be fine. I know that there was always concerned about, well, what if the development is sold and then some, rogue operator comes in who just has a complete disregard for that? Well, that's why the laws are in place, and you have to bring out the stick, and that's just the reality. We can't knock something back based on that. We have to accept that these conditions are what needs to be put in place. The management structures are what need to be put in place, and thankfully, we don't have a rogue operator. We have probably one of the best operators in Fremantle in terms of proven track record of doing the things that this is actually saying. So, thank you.
Dr. Lang, do you speak?
Yeah, just briefly. Thanks for clarifying those questions, and the team for clarifying those questions. And thanks to the community for raising those concerns. Going through the motions on this item, I'm reading a lot about the site and seeing that there is going to be a very similar use internally, although it's new business. It's going to have a large food focus, which shouldn't increase the amount of noise coming from the patrons. And hearing the measures we've got in place for the roof, which is a major concern, although we've got the policy here, what I'm most comforted with is the experience that I've seen firsthand demonstrated by the operators at the local hotel, who are very respectful for the neighbours, and hearing them tonight saying that that's one of their key priorities is maintaining that relationship with their neighbours. I am comfortable to support this proposal. That aside, the proposal itself, I think, is is a very exciting opportunity and offering for Fremantle that I think Perth has been asking for a venue or a place like this for a while, and I'm very grateful it's going to be in Fremantle. And I do have a lot of trust and faith in the operators that they will be respectful to the neighbours. That's why I'm able to support it tonight.
Okay, any further comments for a vote? Councillor Lorvat.
Yeah, it really, given from the folks in the audience tonight, it sounds like the operators have really done their market research and they know what to put in this space. And hearing the comments from Councillor Sullivan and again and Councillor Lang, if this was some fly-by-night outfit that we had never heard of before, I might support a deferral to maybe tighten up some of that a little bit better. But I think that I'm really swayed by Councillor Sullivan. We don't want to have a haphazard enforcement time around the city. It would just invite confusion, and hopefully that if they can achieve that that outcome with a retractable roof, it'll actually be better than what it was before. So support this, and hopefully as we go forward, this will be the first of many exciting developments that are going to be happening around Fremantle.
Any further discussion? Can we vote? Okay, all those in favour? That's approved unanimously. That's by delegation tonight. Thank you. And those sound conditions are legally binding. It's not an option, so you need to liaise with council officers if they are breached. Thank you. Now, I'm just going to take things one by one because we've got a couple of things we have to do anyway. But item 3 is a small bar on Lefroy Road. I'll move the recommendation for approval as seconder. Councillor Groom, any discussion? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6, Forest Street, demolition of group dwelling and construction of 2-storey group dwelling. Recommended for approval. I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Graham. Any discussion? All those in favour? All those in favour? Sorry? Item 6? I take it you've read your agenda? Well, it's this or a toilet break, so what do you prefer? Item 6, we all ready? Item 6, any discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Item 7, Pass Crescent, 2-storey single house. Recommended for approval. Moved and seconded by Councillor Graham. Moved by me. Any discussion? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Nicholas Crescent, there is a motion for referral this, so I'll move the officer's recommendation and look for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Lorva. And Councillor Groom, you have a referral. Would you like to move that?
Yes, I would like to move that we refer this back to officers to engage with the proponents to look at we can come up with a better design outcome with less discretion sought and in particular less impact on the neighbouring property.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Lorva. Any discussion? So it's the daylight access and ventilation amenity. Any discussion on that? Councillor Lorva?
Just real briefly, I wish Councillor Groom had been around when a lot of these corners had been cut up because the outcome could have been possibly different. So having another chance to see an improved space for people to live is something that I absolutely support.
And we're ready to vote? All those, sorry, Councillor Graham.
Oh yeah, look, I'll just put my 2 bobs in. Look, these sites are so problematic. I mean, I just don't know whether sending it back to have another look at is going to actually get a better outcome. I think we've got to, if you go up there and have a look at it, I mean, I don't know whether the existing house did the subdivision or not, but the people have got it and they've got to live with it. And the people who own the block have got to come up with some design. Now, they haven't come up with a 2-storey building. They haven't come up with anything, it's actually quite a clever design in some people's eyes. So I just don't know that referring it back for them to have a look and start all over, you basically have to start all over again. You know, I'm quite happy to accept either way, but you know, if it was up for approval tonight, well, it is up for approval, so I would have put my hand up for that. So the point is, why refer it back when you're not going to get mostly anything better? I'll leave it at that.
Mayor Fitzhardinge.
Can I just ask, from an officer perspective, has there been much engagement with the proponent so far? And if so, have they expressed any willingness to amend plans?
Look, they have. They did have to do a bit of work in the streetscape because it is in Hilton, which is a heritage area. So they did have to set the building back a little bit further. They had it quite close to the street. It's a challenging site for them, and we were pretty happy with how they responded.
Any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I mean, these ones are really challenging. I mean, I accept Councillor Graham's comments, but equally, you know, as he said, you know, it's up to the applicant to come up with a design that works. I'm guessing that, you know, it's very much a sort of project formula approach, and this is the best that they've been able to do in terms of, you know, coming up with an alternative approach. But, you know, I looked at that drawing for probably about 30 seconds before my mind went into overdrive to go, there are so many things that you would change at the front of that dwelling in terms of the garage location and etc., just to make it, you know, significantly more livable for the owner. And Councillor Groom's obviously, you know, her first sort of landing point was there's probably lots of things you would do to make it more tolerable for the neighbour in terms of the impact it has on them. So, you know, I know that I've been speaking to Councillor Groom, I think we both sort of like, you know, felt like getting the pen out and then resisted doing that. But it's just one of those ones that, you know, there are so many quick, easy, simple solutions. And maybe bringing the applicant in and having a conversation might be able to produce that. But we need to be clear, probably, and it's maybe not as clear in the recommendation as to suggestions for the officers to be able to sit down with the applicant to talk about. I mean, that's the challenging thing. We don't actually have a designer in house to sit down with them to basically propose what changes might be. Even if Councillor Groom and I think we have some quick solutions in our heads, it doesn't help the process necessarily. So that's the shortfall. Yeah. So, but I still, in this one, I think it's not passable in its current form, and I think that's Councillor Groom's position.
Councillor Groom.
I don't know if you get to close on one of these, but I will.
Sorry, if just let me check nobody else will speak first. Okay, so you're going to close. Okay.
I fully accept Councillor Graham's sentiment, and these blocks are awful, and bad luck for the people who buy them. But this one is interesting because one of its boundaries, the longest boundary, abuts a driveway. But they haven't chosen to build to that boundary. They've chosen to push their entire building to the other boundary, which is immediately adjacent to the next house, like really, really close. And they've built right up, not only against that house, but against its backyard. So it's the imposition on that adjoining house is quite extensive, and you can really kind of pick that up from the aerials. And it actually isn't their only option because of having a boundary along the driveway. So certainly whenever I look at something like this and think, that's awful, could you have done anything else? Did you have other options that would be less awful before saying, we think you can do a better job? And this was one of those. I looked at that for quite a while. But there are clearly other options that A, will be better for them, but B, will, more importantly, better for their neighbours. So that's why I would like to encourage them to have another go, accepting that that can be very hard when you know, they're getting design from a design advice from a builder, not a designer, which is tricky.
Okay, we're ready to vote. All those in favour of a referral? That's unanimous, thank you. Item 9, I had to work out where Luke Street was. Don't have to do that very often. The little street next to John Curtin, between John Curtin and the monument. The little one with 8 houses in it. What have we got? Alterations and additions, single house. Okay. Recommended for approval. I'll move the recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Groom. Any discussion? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Item 10 we've got, keep to the last. Item 11 is the info report. I'll move that that's received. The seconder, Councillor Groom. Any questions? So receive the information report. All in favour? Item 12 it has a confidential attachment. We don't need to go behind closed doors if no one wishes to discuss the attachment. So we can just move that and vote on it. That's item 12, waiving fees for 2 developments. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Lorver. Any discussion? All those in favour? That's carried. And now we just have the confidential item, which 2 councillors will. This is JDAP Form 1, is it? SDAU, sorry. So Councillors Lang and Sullivan will leave the room. This is a SDAU referral. Are they asking for another extension of time or just a modification of the building? So it's not an extension of time. It says that somewhere in the report. Anyway, okay, so it's minor modification to the building, not a further extension of time. I'll move that, which is a report to SDAU. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Groom. Any discussion? They're very minor amendments, very minor. I just wish they'd build something. We just approved another one for the same company tonight. Okay, all those in favour? That's carried. And is that, are we finished? Oh, we've got the other bits here. What do we got? Ask them if they want to come back in, but there's not much point. Any motions with previous notice, urgent business, late items, confidential business? And just before closing the meeting, I'll just reiterate, this is my last meeting after 14 years on the planning committee, which is 20% of my life. Feels like more. So I just would like to thank all the people who've been on the planning committee over the years, and particularly this last session. I think we've had some fairly difficult issues to deal with, and we've generally dealt with them reasonably well. And thanks to all the officers, I think we've developed a very good rapport with the officers, and we've been able to resolve most of the things that are under our control and have some impact on the ones that aren't. So, so thank you all, and the best of luck in the future. Sorry, close the meeting at 8:28.